The time is 2 p.m. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Market View right here on Eswatini TV. My name is Notilesi Tole. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the program. On Monday, lead economists, policy makers and development partners convened for the launch and public lecture of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa's flagship publication, that is the Economic Report on Africa, Era 2025. Now, the report calls for a paradigm shift in how African economies trade, industrialize and integrate. Jointly hosted by the University of Eswatini's Department of Economics, the United Nations Development Programme, the Central Bank of Eswatini and UNECA, the aim is to translate high-level policy into actionable strategies that can unlock the full potential of the AFCFTA. Today, we speak to Daniel Dlamini, head of the Economics Department at the University of Eswatini, to unpack what this report, not only this report means for Southern Africa, but what strategic actions are being proposed and how we as a country can seize new opportunities under the continental free trade area. This is Market View. We're going to kick off the show with some more business stories after this. In our business news this afternoon, the Minister for Commerce, Industry and Trade, Honorable Mangoba Khumalo, has officially announced the dates for the highly anticipated Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise MSME Conference, a platform designed to empower entrepreneurs and boost the sector's role in driving economic growth and development. The announcement was made from the Minister's offices in Mbabane.
It will take place from the 10th to the 12th of November 2025, and the conference will be symbolically staged at the Royal Villas Hotel in the Zulwini Valley. That is the hub of several MSMEs, particularly in the tourist sector. The Eswatini MSME Conference 2025 stems from His Majesty's vision when he said, let us run with speed under the Nkwe mandate for accelerated transformation so that we can boost our economic growth by 12% to 2029. It is also hinged on a broad program to strengthen the MSME ecosystem in Eswatini, which is currently being implemented by SEDCO under the auspices of our ministry. The themes will be job creation, women and youth empowerment, and how we can diversify our economy. It is against this backdrop that this conference will be held. There will also be a virtual participation option because the venue may not be big enough to accommodate everybody, and other people may want to participate remotely. The conference will convene approximately 250 representatives from the local and regional MSMEs, private sector businesses, government departments, financial institutions, as well as international development organizations. Throughout the conference, there will be the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of experiences, equipping entrepreneurs with practical strategies and solutions that speak to funding gaps, market access, capacity building, technology adoption, innovation, as well as digital transformation.
The Ministry of Finance, with support from the African Development Bank, is working to establish a strong legal framework for public-private partnerships to promote accountability, transparency, and clear operational guidelines for private sector participation in government development projects.
The primary purpose of this workshop is to validate, build consensus around the PPP toolkits that have been developed to guide the preparation, appraisal, and management of PPP projects in Eswatini. These toolkits are intended to serve as practical instruments that will help ministries and public entities implement PPPs more efficiently and transparently, while ensuring value for money and fiscal responsibility.
Cynthia, who is a legal counsel at the African Legal Support Facility, explains more about the toolkits.
What a toolkit is it's a set of documents, standardized templates, crossing from procurement into negotiation to allow the government stakeholders when they're dealing with a PPP project to be able to refer to a standard document so that they can have uniformity across the board. So for instance, if they are going into procurement, they will have an RFP, which is a request for proposals document. So they're able to go and tailor it according to that project. And the reason for a toolkit is that it allows for the private sector to have an idea of what engagement with the government would look like. So they're able to know when I'm dealing with the government, if I'm going to help them operate and manage a public building, they are going to give me this sort of contract that will have this sort of terms. So you're able to provide more clarity in the case of your engagements with the private sector, and it also relieves and shortens negotiation times between the government and the private sector. And standardized documents also send a message to the private sector that the government is well placed to engage on these sorts of projects. Most of these times we have seen that these projects are very expensive for government. I mean, government has social services to mostly be dealing with. But through engagement with private sector, they're able to relieve some of that responsibility, but also still allowing them to operate within defined scope of work.
The African Development Bank supports public-private sector partnerships in the country through its overarching PPP Strategic Framework 2021-2031, which aims to create enabling environments and structure viable PPP projects for infrastructure. The African Development Bank's involvement also includes potential capacity building and technical assistance to Eswatini stakeholders to develop a stronger PPP environment and align with the bank's strategic direction. Reporting, Nelson Langamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa, Mbabane.
And you're up to date with some of the latest in business. Stick around. Market Review continues after this.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. You're now tuning into our Enterprise Watch segment, where we begin here. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, SROSA, in partnership with the University of Eswatini's Department of Economics, UNDP Eswatini, and the Central Bank of Eswatini hosted a thought-provoking public lecture on Monday and officially launched the Economic Report on Africa, that is the ERA 2025. The lecture explored the implications and actionable pathways for the successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. To delve deeper into the lecture, we're now joined by the head of the Economics Department at the University of Eswatini, Daniel Dlamini. A very good afternoon to you, Nkosi, and thank you so much for coming through to our studios. Perhaps you could just begin here. Why this public lecture was so important. Why was it so essential for the University of Eswatini to actually host such a lecture?
Thank you very much, Notsile, and a very good afternoon to all the viewers at home. It was so important for the university to host the public lecture because its main objective was to try and facilitate and promote public engagement and awareness on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So we felt like as a university we should be on the forefront of driving any engagement that is going to inform policy on issues bordering around the implementation or the challenges of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Yeah.
As a country, we're already a member of several trade agreements, from SACU and EU SADC economic partnership agreements. Where does the AFCFTA fit in this entire landscape? What are the implications or the opportunities here?
Okay, one interesting thing is that, such challenges were envisaged, I think, right from the conception of the agreement. And as such, Article 19 of the agreement does provide for existing agreements, how to get around existing agreements. We very much know that for a country like Swaziland, we have the Southern African Customs area, which is one of the agreements that is bringing a lot of revenue for the country. And I could say it sustains the country. So what the African Continental Free Trade Area does is that for those agreements which are, giving greater benefits, that is existing agreements that are giving greater benefits to countries, the African Continental Trade Area is actually going to, sustain those or not interfere with such agreements, but for those that may be inconsistent with what the African Trade Area is trying to enforce, then those are the ones that government will be persuaded to sort of align them with the objectives of the African Free Trade Area agreement. But maybe, if I were to put it in short, this doesn't mean agreements which are beneficial to the country are going to die. They are still going to be there, but ways are going to be found which ensure that these agreements are existing in tandem with the African Continental Free Trade Area.
The kingdom is a smaller player, small economy in a continental bloc. How can we now strategically position ourselves to avoid, being a less of a player in such a continental marketplace?
Yes, I think this public lecture has come at an opportune time for the country, in the sense that we have a lot of vulnerabilities which, if we do not take advantage of the opportunities that are brought by this agreement, we may find ourselves, on the receiving end. If I may elaborate on this, as a country, we all know that we are landlocked, which is one of the disadvantages that we have. But, getting into the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to expand markets for us. And there are a lot of things, because one of the things that the agreement is advocating for is the pooling of resources, which resources are going to ensure that countries are able to develop their infrastructure, countries are able to even, import the necessary innovation which is going to simplify trade. And with the simplification of trade, we believe that it will then be enabled for our even our small businesses to sort of get the necessary technology that will enable them to develop products that could easily be exported to external markets. This is something that we cannot do in isolation, but through the pooling of resources, collaborating with other countries, taking full advantage of what the African Continental Free Trade Area brings, will enable the country to get the full benefit of what the agreement has to bring.
Pooling of resources, key resources, finances, and finances we get them via investors. So what's the kind of investment climate that as a country we should be building to attract regional investors, that look to tap into this regional market?
Actually, I think I will say as a country we're on the right track, because I can see that we are trying to expedite our efforts in as far as digitization is concerned, because that is where the world is right now. So if you develop your infrastructure, that will easily attract investment. So I would say one of the things that the country has to do is to ensure that it channels all its effort towards making the environment, the trading environment, as conducive as possible. We know that it's not only attracting investment, but it's also making possible for trade to flow. So we know that one of the impediments of trade is the issue of tariff and non-tariff barriers. I'm happy because in the public lecture, one of the things that was mentioned by the Ministry of Commerce when they were presenting the framework, they did indicate that some of these difficulties or challenges that we see in in our borders will be a thing of the past. There will be a smooth flow of trucks, digitization, which will ensure that, goods are cleared from wherever they will be coming from, so that we won't have the long queues and the like. So those are the things that we need to do, because if you want to attract investors should be, should get that comfort that it will be easy to bring their raw materials, manufacture goods, and be easy to export goods to their destination. So those are, I think, the essential things. So ours is just to try and formulate policies that are going to ensure that such a conducive environment is created within the country.
Because our young economists, the students, were part of this public lecture, and with the youth in this very country being key or central to the development of the Kingdom of Eswatini, perhaps you could share the insights, from some of the presentations during the lecture that you think reflect on their hunger for participation or perspectives on continental trade and economic integration.
Yes, it is pleasing to say that not only did the students benefit from the presentations, but they were involved themselves because they also had presentations to make. And one of the presentations that they made was on trying to track the trends, the trade trends, and the barriers, the challenges. And it was such an insightful presentation that they presented, to the extent that our collaborators, that is UNECA, the UNDP, and the like, were very much impressed with our students. But then coming to your question, I think our students are future policymakers. So the presentations, as I indicated earlier on, were such that those supply side constraints that we have were sort of laid bare for everyone to see that, we've got challenges that some of which we could only, we could easily work on. And there are also some gaps in terms of trade facilitation, also the issue of institutional fragmentation. All these were in the presentations, and students were made to understand that if trade is to succeed, all these things are impediments to trade, and these are things that we need to work on.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we part, Ngozi, I have to give you a bonus one. What does successful implementation of the AFCFTA look like in 10 years, in 5, in 10, 15, not only for the Southern African region, but for Eswatini?
Yeah, I would say that to me, I was quite impressed because if we are speaking about 54, 55 countries having signed the agreement, about 48 have already ratified and deposited instruments, and Eswatini was amongst the first countries to do that. It shows great ambition on our part to see this agreement succeeding. So I will say, with the developments that are happening, even on the infrastructural development and the digitization, it to me, 10 years is a long period to start, reaping rewards for the effort that we are putting in making sure that we are simplifying all trade means in the country. So I will say in 5 years' time, things will be different from what we are seeing now.
Right.
Yeah.
Very enough. Ngozi, thank you so much for your time. This is the part where we wrap up our conversation. Daniel Dlamini, Head of Economics at UNESCO, unpacking the recently held public lecture and launch of the ERA 2025, and also deliberations on the effective implementation of the AFCFTA. We'll catch a break after this one. Conversation with in-house economist Sanele Sibia.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome back now for our market analysis segment. In-house economist Sanele Sibia joins me virtually. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Sibia, and thank you so much for your time. But perhaps before you give us the numbers and what is actually shaping markets today, I did read a headline: U.S. Fed rate is expected to, announce a decision on Wednesday. That's regards to rate cuts. What's your expectation in terms of inflation?
Thank you, Notsile. What we're seeing there is, inflation has somehow stabilized in the US, so there is a bit of that stable inflation outlook. So markets are quite expectant of an interest rate cut on that Wednesday meeting. And if you look at the markets now, if I can segue straight into that, what you're seeing there with those movements, the US markets actually closed on a positive last night with all indices closing at near record highs, and with the Nasdaq Composite Index gaining some 432 points, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gaining some 337 points, and the S&P 500 gaining some 83 points. So what that tells you is markets are quite optimistic of what the news are going to be coming out of that Fed meeting. And then now recall that we are also in earnings season, and those are blue tech, those blue chip stocks are actually expected to make their reports known, and markets are quite expectant of beautiful reports there to come. And then when you move on to Europe, what we're seeing is a bit of divergence. Within the broader Eurozone, what we're seeing is that the DAX and the CAC 40 are actually on a losing streak. That's because there's a survey that was released, and it shows that European banks are somehow restricting credit, which shows that there is a bit of inflation fears and and we do expect the ECB to hold interest rates steady going forward. But when you go into Europe overall, you can see that the relative strength of the sterling is somehow supporting markets, and also the fact that we are heading into those budget meetings within the UK. And when you go into Asia now, what we're seeing is a bit paradoxical, not only because we know there's been a trade framework that has been signed between China and the US, and then also we've seen yet another trade deal being signed between Japan and the US. So what we would expect is for markets to react positively to that. But what has happened in this case is in the early trades of the day, you saw that those markets were doing relatively well because investors were buying the rumors. So eventually when the news got broke, then it was something that we've already bought into, and there was a bit of that correction because markets expected a full-on trade deal within the US, but what we saw there was a framework. And then in South Africa, the strength of the financials is actually shoring up. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange gaining some 800 points in today's trade, regardless of the weaker strength within gold and those heavy metals there. And when you come into Eswatini, we are relatively stable. So gold has actually lost a bit of ground back on that 3,900 mark because, the geopolitical tensions seem to be easing, and, there's been a bit of profit taking, while oil is actually losing a bit purely because we're seeing OPEC, coming up with a plan to say how do they assess and show up markets in the background of those sanctions against Russia, and also just to make sure that we're able to keep markets steady. And then in terms of the exchange rate, the Lilangeni is relatively weak in today's trade owing to those positive sentiments and the interest rate expectations in the US. Thank you, Nutsulu.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights. In-house economist Sanele Sibia helping us make sense of what is shaping the day's trade. This has been the Tuesday edition of Market View. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care.
Prime Minister pledged to boost military spending to 2% of GDP this year, ahead of schedule. A promise warmly welcomed by the US President, as it includes purchases of American military equipment. Joining Trump on stage, she doubled down on her wish.
Madam Prime Minister.
Japan is committed